Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today I welcome to the front porch a dear, dear old friend, many, many miles away from me right now, Andrew Brown. Thanks so much for coming on my front porch, Andrew.
Well, Doug, it's great to get to your front porch again, but mate, I like sitting in your backyard. It's got a beautiful outlook over the field. It's very comfortable there. So we're going to pick up our coffee and we're going to walk around to the back. Is that okay?
Oh, that we're drinking coffee in this episode? Okay, that's fine. Yes, we'll move to the back porch, Andrew. So, I guess the listeners already can tell that Andrew's voice gives something away in that he has a little bit of an accent, and we're going to talk a lot about why he has that accent throughout the course of this episode. But Andrew, why don't you tell everybody how we know each other?
Well, Doug, I was at university in Australia doing my degree, my teaching degree, and the opportunity came up to do an exchange over in Lockhaven in the United States. So I turned up there in January 1999 and met you very soon after because you were heavily involved with the international students there. So we developed a friendship pretty quickly.
Yeah, it did. It was one of those friendships that, we didn't know each other from Adam, but within the first a couple maybe hours or days of getting to know each other, a friendship blossomed very quickly, and fast forward 21 years and here we are sitting having this conversation. So it's great. When I made my notes for this interview, Andrew, I broke it down into two parts: your Southern Hemisphere life and your Northern Hemisphere life.
Yes.
So let's start below the equator. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Okay, well, I sort of grew up in two main sections. If people know Australia, the best state, the premier state is New South Wales. And basically from when I was about 4 till about 12, I grew up in a place called Dubbo. That's an Aboriginal word for meeting place. And Dubbo is a typical Western town, big town, 20-odd thousand, 30-odd thousand people. And it was great. As a young bloke there, could ride my bike all over town. I played soccer in the winter. I played hockey in the winter. I played cricket in the summer. And then when I was 12, my dad, who was a teacher, got a job or a position, teaching position, over on the coast at a place called, wait for it, Woolgoolga. It's a hard name to say, but a great place to stay. And we moved over to the coast. So that part of my life has probably been the most impressionable because the family, we consider ourselves a coastal dwelling family now in Australia.
Okay. And I'm going to ask the question that probably most Americans ask when they meet someone from Australia. Is it true that you can go out and drive and you just see kangaroos and stuff all over the place?
Well, yes, you do. My parents, well, they don't live right by the beach anymore, but not far away. And so my mother has a small apartment on my sister's block. And there would usually be between 10 and 15, 20, 30 kangaroos that just lie on the front lawn or the back lawn or hop up to the veranda and look at us while we're sitting out drinking our coffee in the morning or late of an evening, a different beverage. So, yes, there are kangaroos everywhere.
That's so great. So you grew up, like you said, in those two different places. And then after going to school, you decided to, at some point, enter the police force, correct?
Yeah, I did. I originally went to university in 1986, and I had a fine old time. I made the university golf team. I made some good friends, and somewhere along the line, I forgot to study. So I was asked, or I was not readmitted to the faculty for the following academic year. So I found myself at the age of 19 and a half wondering what to do with my future for 3 years. So I did join the New South Wales Police Force, and I did 6.5 years service.
So what was that like? I mean, in the United States right now, that's a hot topic. Police forces and cops in general, and police reform. What was your experience like in during that time period to be a police officer? Were you someone that was out doing like traffic stops, or what did your job entail?
The first couple of years, I was a general duties policeman, which is the run of the mill policeman working at a police station and doing patrols. And then I did join the highway patrol, and I did that for about 4.5 years. Uh, it's a tough job, and I don't imagine it's got any easier anywhere in the world. And as I say, if a policeman knocks on your door, he's not there to tell you you've won the lottery. So I see and read and hear a lot about what's going on with police all over the world, and knowing how tough a gig it is, I just sort of think I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
What are some things that you took away from that job, that maybe you are apply today in and we're gonna eventually talk about what you do now, but what are some of the things that you learned being a police officer that has really have it stuck by you since?
Good question, Doug. Gee, I don't often reflect on what I've brought forward. I bring forward some real perspective on how bad things can be for some people in the world. I've seen the dark side of life, and I've seen tragedy, um, and that gives me some perspective about what might what how I feel about life today. I know that people do it tough, and it just helps me think. Okay, I've seen that, and it makes me appreciate how lucky I am in my family life, in my personal life, in my career life. And when I see people struggling, I can really, really feel for them.
Do you think there's anything you learned from your time as a police officer that has helped you better, to be able to communicate with people better maybe?
Communication. Well, that's a big thing, especially in the job that I do now that we'll get to later. But
Mhm.
yeah, how you communicate with people is a big part of policing. How you speak to people and how that can impact upon a situation. So you certainly learn that as you're in the police, and it's something that I've taken away, hopefully, and used to be a better person going forward.
Okay. So eventually you decided I'm going to make a career move and you went back to university and this time you decided you wanted to get into education and become a teacher. You had mentioned that your dad was a teacher. Was that maybe one of the inspirations for you becoming a teacher?
Yeah, that ill-fated trip to university in 1986. I just left school the year before that, and I had actually wanted to become a high school teacher, and my dad talked me out of that. And so I ended up trying to do an accounting degree, and like I said, I wasn't invited back to the faculty. So now, after that, and a few years' service in the police, and a bit of time in a family business, then it was time to go back to university. But I chose primary teaching, or as you Americans would say, elementary school teaching. And this time, Dad said it was a great idea.
So, and then let's talk a little bit about what you already mentioned is that at one point you had the opportunity to study abroad, and of all the places you could have chosen that your university probably had connections with, you decided the United States, and in particular Lock Haven University in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Do you remember what made you choose that as your destination?
It was a pretty quick decision to decide to do an exchange. I had some change in my life and really wanted to try an exchange, and Lock Haven was available. And at short notice, I was able to get everything organised. And so, Lock Haven, here I come, January 1999.
And what do you remember as first impressions coming to the United? Was this your first time to the United States?
It was, yeah, it was my, it was great. Landed in Los Angeles with a connection to Pittsburgh, and then they said there's a huge snowstorm over Pennsylvania, so unless you can secure a hotel room in Pittsburgh, we're not letting you fly any further. And I went, oh, this is interesting. One, because growing up on the coast in Australia, you don't often see snow, as in never. So anyway, I got to Pittsburgh, and then I spent a couple of days at Pittsburgh Airport, and it turned up to the gate, and the pilot said, "We're ready to fly. We just don't have a plane." It took me forever to get to Lockhaven, and I eventually ended up there in the middle of the night after being picked up by the head of the international department. He came and picked us up from, was it Williamsport? And
Probably, yeah.
then he drove us into Lockhaven. So I got there in the middle of the night, and yes, there was tons of snow on the ground because the blizzard had just passed through. And that was my introduction to Lockhaven.
That was a perfect introduction, if you ask me. Coming from where you came, it was like a baptism by fire, I guess. You walk out of that airplane and it's just snow and cold and wind, and probably everything was the opposite of what you were used to in that sense. So you spent a semester in Lockhaven, and I mean, we have to talk about this. You met your wife there, who would be your future wife. Let's talk a little bit about that. Heidi, your wife, was an international student as well, from Norway, and college is what college can be sometimes. But well, what do you remember about meeting Heidi, and eventually, on a you were only here for a couple months, or you were only planning to be here for a couple months, and I'm sure that the last thing on your mind was that you were gonna meet your future wife. So tell me a little bit about that.
I could tell you a lot about that, Doug, but I won't. No, the first I remember about Heidi, she was an RA in High Hall, which was the residence hall, and I remember her just a bit behind the desk, and then within the first week, I hopped into the elevator to go up to my room, and she was in the lift. And if you remember, we played indoor soccer, and they were getting an indoor soccer game going, and she actually
Hmm.
asked, was I going to play? And being an Australian and being a natural sportsman and skilled in every sport I've ever tried, I said yes. And so I remember playing football, and she actually went to Lockhaven on a football scholarship, was played on the
Yep.
women's football team. So anyway, so we hung out at the football a bit, and over the course of the next month or two, we got to know each other, and then she couldn't resist me after a while.
Well, I can see why. I mean, I couldn't resist you either, my friend, when I
Yeah,
first met you. Um,
nothing
so it was, yeah, right. We spent a wonderful couple months together. I have a lot of very fond memories of the time that you were at Lockhaven, and becoming friends with you, and everything that's come after that. So we'll fast forward a little bit. You had to go back to Australia, of course. But this relationship that you had started with Heidi was going on. How did you guys decide? Like, I mean, long distance relationships are extremely difficult, especially when we're thinking about, you were going back to the other side of the world, and she still had a degree to finish up. How did you guys maintain that relationship with such a huge distance? And we're talking late '90s, very early 2000s. So a lot of the communication things, apps and things like we have today didn't exist yet. So how did you guys do it?
Yeah, probably email and phone calls. I came to Norway 6 months after leaving Lockhaven for my first Christmas here. She invited me here, and that was wonderful. And then I started teaching, and I got back to Lockhaven. I think it must have been for the Easter holidays, and when she was still at Lockhaven. And then her she did an exchange in Glasgow. So for the second Christmas, I met her in Glasgow and came back to Norway. And then she thankfully did a master's degree and chose Australia to do a master's degree. So she came to Australia for a year, and that was fantastic. So there we were. We tried the long distance thing, and then we got to be close together again. It was fantastic.
So now we can shift into the northern hemisphere section of your life, I think. So you and Heidi, as you said, she came to Australia. She studied there, finished up her degrees, and then eventually, I guess you guys had the conversation about getting married. How I've often wondered this. And I never asked you this question. How did it come? How was it? How did you guys make the decision as to how to go forward, being from two different countries?
I jokingly say that she kidnapped me, but that's not quite true. We had those conversations. We got engaged, and she had studied abroad totally for 5 odd years by that stage, and naturally felt an inclination to move back to Norway. And I was very open minded. Are you there, Doug?
Yeah, I'm still
Oh, good,
listening.
because
Yep.
my screen just disappeared. That's all.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So she wanted to move back to Norway, and I was inclined. And on that second trip to Norway, I had made contact with an international school in Oslo, which is called Oslo International School. And I had just a how to do meeting with the head of the school. Anyway, Heidi had decided to go back to Norway. This is the middle of 2001, and she was heading off from her master's studies back to Norway. And I got an email from the Oslo International School offering me a job, which was incredible timing. And we were able to organise my resignation from my teaching job in Sydney. I was able to organise a working visa in Norway. And early in August of that year, so virtually maybe only 6 or 8 weeks after the invitation to the job came through, I found myself in Norway.
It is like the cards fell just right for that. All when you think about all the moving parts to that story, and for them to fall in the way that they did, that's kismet, I guess, right? Fate, I guess.
Well, it went pretty well. Let's put it down to whatever you believe in.
Right, right. So, my goodness, here was this guy now, from Australia who'd grown up on the coast, a beach guy, and he's decided he's moving to Norway. What was that? What was that transition like for you? And I'm not. We'll talk about like learning the language and the culture, but just that initial transition as going from such what I don't know if you could have two more polar opposite climates and cultures than the Australian culture and the Norwegian culture. And here you are deciding I'm picking up and moving, moving my life to Norway. How was that initial transition?
Well, it was easy job wise. I fit right in at the Oslo International School. Heidi and I set up home in her hometown, and our hometown still. It's called Moss, which is an English sounding word, and it's south of Oslo. So fit right in with the work situation. And then, of course, I started learning Norwegian, and then Norway's the sort of country where you just have to fit in. It is totally different, and of course I don't I used to love winter a bit more than I do now, and I was really very thankful that Heidi's parents really welcomed me to Norway. We had I think my visa, if I remember it correctly, is the type that we had to get married within 6 months of me arriving in the country. So our wedding plans occupied the first 6 months of being here as well. And so in January, about 6 months after I'd arrived, mum and dad came over and my brother came over, and we had a bit of a wedding.
Mhm. And I mean, I've been to Norway. I was came and visited you guys already in my past, but I mean, I haven't spent enough time there to know. Are the Norwegian people, were they welcoming to you as a non-Norwegian when as you started interacting in the society? I mean, you had your job, but Oslo International School is an English-speaking school, and we'll come back to that. But you still had to go everyday life, and as you were learning Norwegian, did you find the Norwegian people to be very welcoming and warm to you as an outsider?
Yeah, they were and they are. They're a very nice people. They're interested in other people. Thankfully, they all speak pretty good English. They all learn it at school from first class at school, so they get and of course, access to English has increased just with the blooming of the internet in the last 20 odd years as well for kids. So I was lucky that everyone was able to speak to me, and that actually was a bit of a hindrance. Learning Norwegian, actually, you'd go somewhere and try and speak a bit of Norwegian, and they'd speak to you back in English. But my mother-in-law, she was the first real person that I started holding conversations with, and I appreciate that very much. That she took the time to, you know, help me learn in a conversation manner. Because I went to classes. Every immigrant to Norway at that stage, I'm not sure if it's still correct, you get 200 hours of Norwegian language instruction free. and so I took advantage of that. So there was a bit of night school, if you want to call it that, twice a
Mhm.
week, learning the basics of grammar and things like that. But the conversation was hard. Heidi and I have always spoken English. We don't speak Norwegian together, and we have a bilingual family. So it was my mother-in-law and then my father-in-law, of course, who were the first people that I spoke Norwegian with conversationally.
Yeah, it's that happens to a lot of people no matter where they go that they're learning a foreign language, and especially I find in Western Europe, you've spent all this time learning or trying to learn a language, and then you go to the country to actually get to use it, and as soon as they detect that that you speak English or whatever, then they want to speak English. I mean, this happened to me many times in my travels where I had enough language that I wanted to actually use it in places, and I was excited to use it, and then it'd be like I'd just be met with English all the time, and it was frustrating. I would try to keep going in the language that I was trying to work with, but everybody was throwing English right back at me. So I can imagine the frustration that you probably had too. Having spent this time and you were investing in this new country that was now your home, and then to have people kind of be like that would be tough for sure.
Yeah, it was just something I recall as we went along. But as I learnt more and more language and could hold more of a conversation, things turned around, and I always made a point of not speaking English to Norwegian people. In
Ah.
fact, once I had the language skills in there, and even these days, if a Norwegian person speaks English to me, I'll just keep speaking in Norwegian.
Uh-huh. So I'm going to ask these questions not in a reason to make fun of either country, but what are some of the things now that you've lived in Norway for as long as you have? What are some of the things about Norway, the people, the culture that you really really enjoy?
Really enjoy. Norwegians have a great attitude to where they live in the world because here winter is long. And I'm laughing with a touch of irony in my laugh. So they are great. They have a great attitude about getting outdoors. Norwegians actually have a saying: there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing. And what that essentially means is that they have a ton of clothing to cope with absolutely everything. So in the middle of winter, it could be minus 20 degrees Celsius, colder than that outside, and we'll get out there. They have this thing in winter called cross country skiing, which is not downhill skiing, but gliding across the snow. And that's the most fun thing about Norway is after having a good proper winter, and then every town, every village, every city, there's all these ski tracks for going cross country skiing under lights. It's called a lysløype, and of course Moss has one. And so that getting out and doing cross country skiing at night or during the day, of course, is the most fun you can have in Norway.
What are some of the things that frustrate you about Norway or the Norwegian people?
Oh, can I take the fifth?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to, that's fine. Okay, we'll leave it at that then. What are some of the things that you really miss about Australia that you wish maybe had a little bit more of in Norway besides the weather maybe?
Well, where I grew up on the coast of Australia, seasons just really don't exist. I mean, there's a little short winter and uh, a good hot summer, and you don't always get that in Norway. And I always think after a harsh, long, dark 6 months, we deserve a nice hot summer, but we don't always
Right.
get it. So that's the one thing I really miss is definite hot weather. And like this
Yeah.
summer that's just gone, it wasn't a great summer weather-wise here in Norway, and we had to stay here because of the COVID. There was no ability to travel outside of Norway. So, a good long hot summer is what I miss.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your current job. So, as you mentioned, you work for the Oslo International School. Uh, it's funny because on a previous episode, I interviewed a friend of mine, John Striffler, who works at an international school in Seoul, South Korea. And when he was telling me about his school, it reminded me a lot of the things that you had already told me about the school where you work. But for our listeners, what everything's in English, but what kind of people are studying at this school, and what's the age group, and those types of
Yeah,
basic facts?
yeah. I just to hark back, I did listen to John in your interview, and I found that very interesting. Always interested in international educators. So anyway, Oslo International School. We are a school that has everything from preschool, so you've got 4-year-old kids, up to kids doing the IB diploma, and they are usually 18 years of age. So Oslo International School has that span. Total of about 650 kids. We are a school primarily for expats. So these are people who've come to Norway. Either mum or dad usually has employment in Norway, usually for a fixed term or a contractual term. So they'll turn up. So I work in the elementary school, in the primary school, and of the 650 kids in the school, the primary school accounts for around about 270. And now I'm talking years 1 to year 6. And then we have a secondary section, and of course we have the upper secondary. Of course, they're the kids doing the diploma.
Okay. And
43, around about 45 different nationalities.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that goes up and down, of course. Primarily, we have a lot of people from the States, a lot of people from Britain, and then mix up other countries after that.
So we're recording this in October. What was your school year like once COVID hit? How was? I mean, we kind of got news from outside of the United States, back in spring when we went into lockdown. But we don't really hear too much ever about what's going on in Scandinavia, to be honest, for most American news sources. So, how did your school deal with that? How did Norway handle the situation?
Very well. Um, Schools nationally were closed by the national government, and of course, private schools have to abide by that. That would have been, I think, the 12th of March. Is that a
Okay.
Thursday?
Yes,
Um,
that was a Thursday. Yep.
so that's 3 odd weeks before the Easter break that we had. So we were closed, but we went to remote learning. And fortunately, we're well resourced. All of our kids have electronic devices, and our teachers did a magnificent job, and they were virtually teaching the next day. That went really well. So we were closed for 3 weeks before the Easter holiday. Then the national government brought back the schools slowly. So we brought back the preschool and then the age years 1 to 4. And then after a few more weeks, then the rest of the school came back. But there are guidelines on how to run a school. And so we're cautious now. We abide by those guidelines, and they do impact upon your time that you are able to teach during the day. There's lots of hand washing. There's lots of using different doors to come in and out. There's the playground is divided into 4 or 6 areas, and then the kids have to stay in the one area and things like that. So the teaching's going ahead and the school's going ahead. Everything's happening there. Nationally, Norway has handled it pretty well um, in that there is a low infection rate. And currently, people just go about their business. In Oslo, you do have to wear a face mask if you are catching public transport. Other than that, you might see one person in a shopping centre wearing a face mask because people are great. They disinfect their hands going into each and every shop that they go into. They don't touch everything on the shelves. They just pick up what they need.
Mhm.
Then they'll leave. Then they'll disinfect their hands on the way out. So Norway's got a low infection rate. It spikes occasionally, but it's going pretty well.
But restaurants and bars and pretty much social life is back to normal, so to speak?
Yes, I'll add that with a caveat that at my age, I don't get to go out to bars or restaurants too much, Doug. Norway is horrifically expensive to go out as well, Doug. I forgot
Yeah.
to mention that. That was one thing that annoys me about Norway. So, yes, you can go out to restaurants and bars, but I do believe there is they will stop serving alcohol at some stage during the evening.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, but I'd have to ask someone younger than me that goes out.
Right. Well, we don't go out either as much as we used to, that's for sure. Um, Andrew, I always well, you've listened before, so you know what's coming next. I always end or towards the end of our conversation, I like to ask all my guests a series of questions.
Is this the
Um,
end?
well, we can keep going if you want to.
Oh, oh, gosh, all these
Well, okay.
notes
Before I get to the questions, let me ask this: when now travel restrictions, of course, right now are making things really difficult. But um, when's your next planned trip to back home to Australia?
We're actually really fortunate. As a family, we were there for last Christmas. The school gets a 2 week break over the Christmas, and I took an extra week, so we travelled back, and that was fantastic. And of course, we're expecting family to visit us this year a couple of times, and my daughter's confirmation and things like that, and that's all stopped. Australia is very difficult to get back to right now. They're not letting more than about 4,000 to 6,000 people in the whole country back per week, which is a tiny amount of people. So, and plane tickets to get there are scarce and they're hard to get and they're very expensive. I'm not planning a trip back to Australia in the near future.
Until hopefully things will improve here soon.
Yes.
That things like that can happen because I know having family that far away is hard, and you know
It
you
is
look
hard.
forward. I know that you guys often will go for Christmas, and especially if that's kind of like a tradition, and that's that one time you know you get an extended amount of time to visit. That's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
yeah, I don't know. I mean, things are the United States is handling things a little bit differently than a lot of the Western European countries, as I'm sure you're aware of. I don't want to get political on here at all, but it's been a struggle school wise. You know, it sounds like your school has done things well, and the kids are back learning. And it sounds like, of course, there are some hurdles for sure, but it's nothing like what we're going through here right now in my classroom and in my wife's classrooms, and it's. This is it's been a struggle is I think the most accurate term that I can come up with, and I only hope that this can all start to improve quickly because the quality of the education that I know that I'm providing and that a lot of our students are getting is not where it not what it should be, but we're doing the best that we can given the situation that we're currently in. But it doesn't make it any less frustrating, that's for
no,
sure.
and that
Um,
I understand. I mean, I'm speaking to Americans at work, and some of them have a family that educate or are teachers back in the States, and we get stories about what's going on there. And I do appreciate that it is a bit tough back there for
sure.
in the States.
Yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see. We'll just have to
That's
wait and
right.
see. Because I'd love to come visit you guys again, but right now I can't. We can't travel anywhere either.
We'll get you here one day, Doug.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe put me in a box. Amazon will get me there. They seem to travel okay. So, all right, Andrew, I got some questions for you, and I am looking so forward to hearing some of these answers because knowing you like I do, you always are able to surprise me better than most people. So,
Oh no,
yeah, no, in a good way, in a good way, in a good way. All right,
yeah,
here's question number one. What is your morning drink of choice?
it's coffee.
Is Norway a coffee culture?
Oh yeah, they love their coffee. They drink a tremendous amount. So yeah, it's a coffee culture country.
And how do you take your coffee?
I like cream in my coffee.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm curious about this answer. Who is a go-to musical artist of yours?
Well, I have a long commute to work and of course a long commute home, so I listen to over 2 hours of music on the way to and from work every day. So my go-to, and this is a band that you know about, they're called Tedeschi Trucks Band. They're from Jacksonville down in Florida, and they are just magnificent. So they're my number one go-to. Number two is a Canadian band that now don't play anymore. Their lead singer died a few years back, and they are called the Tragically Hip. They have a fantastic career behind them, and they're worth having listened to. I love John Prine. I only
Mhm.
discovered him a few years ago. I was fortunate enough to see him in concert in Oslo. I think it was his second last ever concert, and he unfortunately died in April. So he
Yeah.
died 2 months after I saw him. I love his music. And Mr. Springsteen. What can I say
Yeah.
about the man?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are all great choices. And to listeners, I'm familiar with all of the artists that Andrew just listed, and I would recommend that you guys check all of them out if you haven't. And particularly, I mean, John Prine, what a gift, what an absolute gift.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, unbelievable. All right, what movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Three of them.
Okay.
The Shawshank Redemption,
Uh huh.
Goodwill Hunting, and then the fighter pilot in me likes to watch Top Gun occasionally. I can't wait
Sounds
for Top
good.
Gun 2.
Yeah, I saw. I was reading some stuff about that, and I don't know. I hope it. I hope it's good. I mean, I don't want it to be one of those sequels that comes out and it just ruins everything you think of. What has come before. So, but I'm
Can they
interested in
call it a
seeing it.
sequel? The original came out in 1986. My God,
Right. Yeah, I don't even know what we'd call it,
how many
but yeah,
facelifts
I'm looking.
has Mav had since then?
Yeah, right, right. Well, if you fly fast enough, you don't see the wrinkles, I guess. What is the last thing that you read?
I read a Stephen King book called The Institute.
Okay. Is it typical Stephen King horror
No,
or
no, it wasn't, and he mucked up the ending. I really think he should
oh,
rewrite the last 50 pages.
well, if he's listening, hopefully he gets that message.
I hope you do, Stephen.
What is your favorite pizza topping?
I like seafood pizza, and I don't know if they're big in the States, but in Australia, a seafood pizza's a great pizza to have.
So when you say that, and I think there are some places that will sell something like that, but if you're in Australia, your favorite pizza place back home, and you order a seafood pizza, what is usually on that?
Oh, gee, you'll have a bit of calamari, you'll have prawns, you'll have the small octopus. They'll chuck a bit of fish on there. Oh, it's just heaven.
Can you get anything like that in Norway?
No.
Fair enough. All right. Well, this one, boy. Do you prefer laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Doug, I grew up 125 meters from the Pacific Ocean. The
I,
beach
I
is the only
right.
place to be.
But now that you live in the mountainous country of Norway, I thought, well, maybe I don't know. I mean,
Not a chance.
I was pretty not a chance. Fair enough.
You can take the boy out of Australia, but no way.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, you've invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Okay, it depends on the time of the year, but let's say you land in Norway now, magically. I'm going to feed you a traditional seasonal meal called fårikål, and that is actually lamb stewed in with cabbage, and it's
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah. Well, when I visited you, it was in the summer,
It
and
was.
I know that I was blown away by the amount of reindeer meat that the Norwegians had in grocery stores, and you drove us past reindeer farms, and we had it. Your mother-in-law had us because it was it was kind of funny when I was visiting Heidi and Andrew. They were giving birth to their first child, and like Heidi went into labor while I was there. So here's this poor schmuck, and Andrew's rushing to the hospital, of course, like he should. And Andrew said, "You." I guess he must have made the phone call, and Andrew's in-laws came and kind of picked me up, and I went back to their house while you guys were in labor. And she made this delicious, like almost like a stroganoff style, so a creamed style
Mhm.
reindeer, and oh my god, it was delicious.
It is delicious, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking of that just the other day. That meal, it was so good. But so it sounds good.
Well, if you
But
hang
I'd
around
love to
for a
try.
couple of days, I'll cook that one as well. Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good. What is a? And I know you've traveled a lot over the world, but what is a dream vacation destination for you?
Right now, Australia.
I'm sure. I'm sure that comes up in many dreams at night, probably. Yeah. What is something that? So I'm going to ask. Usually, I only ask my guests this. What is something you're afraid of? But I'm gonna have a follow up to this one too. Then.
Oh, gee. Okay. Snakes are fascinating, but I'm not a great fan. But they are fascinating, and I really don't like public speaking.
Oh, okay. And what is something that you're really proud of?
Oh, on the odd occasion, I can hit a golf ball really well.
I thought you were gonna say like your daughters or something, but hitting a
Oh,
golf
yeah.
ball is good. Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't bring my family into it, but of course, Doug, I'm proud of my daughters. I'm the proudest father, and I'm proud of my
Mm.
wife. Gosh,
As well you should be. As well you should be. Oh man, that made me
exactly.
laugh. So you've had a couple different jobs. You've worn a lot of hats in your life, but what is a job other than one that you currently have or one that you've had in the past that you would love to have?
Well, I'm going to have two jobs. My day job, I'm going to work as a beer brewer in a craft brewery. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then of an evening, I'm going to become the guitar tech for Derek Trucks from the Tedeschi Trucks Band.
That sounds like a great mix. That sounds like a
The,
great
the
mix.
man is a magician. Get on that bandwagon, people. Tedeschi Trucks Band.
I'm sure that the listenership will increase greatly after this episode comes out, for sure. Um, well, Andrew, I will take a minute here to promote your new home to all my listeners out there. I have had the luxury of traveling to Norway, and it was never a country that was on my list of countries to visit. But after having spent a short time there, I highly recommend any American that once travel restrictions are lifted and so forth, and we're back to a normal life again, please consider putting Norway on your list of travel destinations. It's a beautiful country, and I will echo what Andrew said. The people are wonderful. I felt very welcomed and just had a wonderful time there. So I haven't been to Australia yet. I'd love to go, and hopefully someday I'll make it. But I can at least speak towards Norway. Guys should truly consider planning a vacation to Norway. Yep. I think Andrew would second that probably.
Save your pennies. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, that it was expensive, but it was worth it. It truly
It
was.
was, and it is. Come on
Yeah.
over, people. There's plenty of room.
Andrew, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the show. I'm even if people just listen to hear your beautiful accent, that's enough of payment for this.
What
I miss
accent,
you, my
Doug?
friend. I
What
miss
accent?
you, and I yeah, right. But thank you for coming on, and I hope that our conversation will pique the interest of people, even if it's just to pick up a new band to listen to, or if we've enticed people to travel to Norway. But thank you for being such a good friend,
No,
and thank you for coming on the show.
my pleasure, Doug.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Just look for @Doug's Front Porch. Please feel free to tell all your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.